I was very fortunate to get the Kansas City Royals job at a very young age. I was only about 2.5, 3 years out of college. And I've been here ever since. I grew up thinking maybe St. Louis or Chicago, because Bloomington Normal, where I grew up, is right between, almost right between Chicago and St. Louis. My dream job would have been the Cardinals. My dad was a Cardinal fan. We had a radio station in Bloomington, and they were a Cardinal affiliate. So from the time I was probably that high or even smaller, the games were on. I had no idea what it was, but the games were always on. Harry Carey, Jack Buck, and I grew up listening to them. And I thought they were terrific. Harry Carey, when Harry Carey was at his peak as a Cardinal announcer, I don't think there was anybody any more accurate or any better than Harry Carey. So I guess as I was growing up and hearing the games, I was getting a bit of an education, unbeknownst to me, but I'd listen to the games and had some idea. I had baseball cards like most of us probably did, and I had the teams all in order, and I'd lay there in front of the radio on a summer night and listen to the games. And little did I know, when I was in college, as Brad pointed out, I was able to play football and baseball, and I had no idea about broadcasting or announcing, and you're interested in playing, that's the key thing. But I remember had the opportunity my last couple of years in college to do basketball on the local radio station, and that's really what kind of launched my career, such as it is. Now, you think you want to be a baseball announcer, do you? Well, there are some pitfalls. I might point out to you that I grew up not only meeting former players who became broadcasters, like Ralph Kiner, who was a Hall of Fame player. He was a home run hitter, Pittsburgh Pirates, played a little bit for the Cubs. Jerry Coleman was a very good infielder for the Yankees. He became the broadcaster for the San Diego Padres, and I got to know Jerry Coleman, who was very famous for his what we call malaprops. You say one thing and it doesn't come out quite the way you want it to come out. I know that feeling very well. But Jerry Coleman, a couple things that he did, he would be broadcasting the Padres, and he'd say, well, we have a score from another game. The White Sox 7, the Cleveland Indians 2, and the Yankees 1. How'd you like to see that game? Another time, Jerry Coleman was broadcasting, and he said, there's a long drive to left field. Dave Winfield was a left fielder for the Padres at the time. There's a long drive to left field, and Winfield goes back to the wall. He leaps. He hits his head against the wall. It rolls away. He picks it up, and he throws it back to the end. I don't think that would have been a very pleasant video. But I guess that's what happened. Ralph Kiner. One day, Shea Stadium, he was with the Mets. Beautiful Sunday afternoon, Father's Day. And Ralph Kiner said, friends, this is what a beautiful day here at Shea Stadium. It's Father's Day, and it's good to see all the fathers with their kids and everybody here at Shea Stadium. And I just want to say to all the fathers on Father's Day, happy birthday. Okay. Another time Ralph said, most solo home runs come with nobody on base. Can't argue with that. Can't argue with that. Excuse me, my sinuses are getting away from me. But, well, I've had my moments. My second year with the Royals, and I was still trying to figure things out. I was working with a well-known national broadcaster, really a good baseball and basketball announcer, Buddy Blattner. And I was trying to make an impression on him. This is year 2. During the broadcast, we had, and some of you will remember, we'd have what they call commercial drop-ins. Between pitches or batters, you might say, I hope you have Schlitz beer for the weekend or whatever. And you're supposed to just manufacture a one-liner that was timely and appropriate. We were in Milwaukee. It was a Friday night. It was July the 2nd, So 4th of July holiday coming up. Do you all remember Guy's Foods? It was the local and snack foods and, you know, potato chips, party nuts, all that stuff. Well, they were a sponsor. They were a very good sponsor. And Ed Shepard, who was our producer engineer, just put a little card in front of me when I was on the air. Buddy was sitting there listening. And it said Guy's Foods. So I was supposed to think of a one-liner that would be timely and appropriate. As I said, 4th of July weekend, a lot of people out, picnics, boating, camping, the whole outdoor scene. So I said, for those of you planning a holiday picnic, we sure hope you take along plenty of those good Guy's potato chips. We had a pitcher named Al Fitzmaurice who was really slow. And Fitzy was walking around behind the mound, fussing around. I knew he wasn't about to throw another pitch. But I was so happy with the way my little one-liner came out, I thought, well, they're really a good sponsor. Give them another plug. And so help me God, the next line out of my mouth was, and fans, while you're in the store, be sure to grab Guy's nuts. Yes, I did. At which point I figured my career had ended. But fortunately, Buddy said, hey, I've heard worse than that. So on we went. I've had the honor, the pleasure, the fun of meeting so many baseball people, and the Royals have had a series of really interesting, very good managers, all very nice people, easy to get along with, and I always had a little 5-minute pregame show with the manager. Let's call it the manager show or whatever. And Whitey Herzog was pretty good. Now, I'm gonna clean up the words a little bit. I'm sure you guys can figure out what the insert of the word would be. And Whitey Herzog, I always thought, and to this day, I think he's the best manager the Royals have ever had. He was so smart. He was always 2 or 3 innings ahead of the other manager. And that's what made him so good. And he just had a great feel for the game. But he was also a very big fan of Casey Stengel, and Casey Stengel had a way with words too. And thank God before we went on the air, we started our little tape, Whitey and I just talking. I asked him about Dennis Leonard, who was going to pitch that night against Roger Clemens, and I said, how do you compare Roger Clemens to Dennis Leonard? And Whitey said, well, they're similar in a lot of different ways. I wasn't sure what he meant by that. Another time, I'm going to use the word horse bleep, but you can figure that one out. And Whitey once said, you know, it's hard to be lucky when you're horse bleeped. The team wasn't playing very well, and he said, if you're going to play horse bleep, at least play fast. Pretty good. I think that's pretty good advice. And Whitey was terrific. I had more fun with him, and he was so interesting. Tony Muser, do you guys remember Tony?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Tony Muser, excuse me. Tony Muser, sinus. Tony Muser was perfect if they had cast the Western show Lonesome Dove. He looked, he just had the perfect look, the mustache, and he bow-legged and had good sense of humor. And he was funny, he was genuinely funny. And we had a pitcher, some of you will remember, a little left-handed pitcher named Jose Rosado.
Yes.
And he was, in fact, he was the Royals All-Star representative one year, and he won the game was in Cleveland. Jose Rosado was the winning pitcher in the All-Star game. But shortly after that, the next year, Rosado hurt not only his elbow, which is awful for a pitcher, but his shoulder. He was having rotated, double jeopardy. And the next year, we went to spring training. And Jose Rosado knew because of the injury, he was going to have to really be halfway decent to make the team. And he was awful. I mean, he couldn't have gotten any of us out, I swear. We'd have played the exhibition games he was pitching. I mean, it was, but the pitching was so thin, and Tony Muser did not have depth at all. So much so that Jose Rosado made the team. He was in the starting rotation. So the season begins, and we're 2 or 3 weeks into the season, and now Tony has to use Jose Rosado to start the game. So he goes up, we're playing Baltimore, I'll never forget it. And poor Jose went out there, and he couldn't get anybody out. I mean, Baltimore hitters were whistling line drives everywhere. And I'm trying to keep track of how many runs are scoring, and they've got 3, and then they got 4, and then somebody doubles, now it's 6, and somebody singles, now it's 7-0. It's first inning. And I kind of, out of the corner of my eye, I see Tony coming out of the dugout real slow with that bow-legged walk, and he's going out to the mound, and he's got that hangdog cowboy look. He's telling me this the next day. So he gets out to the mound, and Jose's standing there, and I think he knows what's going on, and Tony kind of pats him on the shoulder, and Muser said, "Jose, I think that's enough for tonight." And Tony said, Rosado looked at him and he said, "Skeeper, give me one more heater. I struck this guy out last time." And Tony looked at him and he said, "Jose, I know you did, but we're in the same friggin' inning." That's not good. So, those things happen, and sometimes they're on tape, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's good that they're not. But yeah, it's been fun. I've gotten to know a lot of the other announcers. Steve Stone is a good friend of mine. He worked with Harry Carey for a long time. And we had dinner in Chicago a couple of years ago, and Stoney got rolling on Harry Carey stories, and he said it was almost impossible to cover for him. And Harry, with the Cubs, now he was getting up in years, and he had, remember the big old goggles that he wore, and they were so thick, and he had a scorecard there, and then he'd look up at the field to describe the play, and he'd look at his scorecard. It was up and down, up and down. And they were playing the Pirates, and Harry Carey said, "Line drive to the third baseman, 1 away." Well, no, that's not what happened. The hitter had struck out, and the catcher throws the ball down to the third baseman. And Steve said, "I had no idea how to bail him out of that. Impossible." And then about a year later, he was telling me they were in Philadelphia, and the Cubs had a pitcher named Steve Traxel, and who was their best pitcher at the time. Well, he was having arm problems, shoulder problems, and they were going to have to send him back to Chicago to check him out. So he was going to have to leave from Philadelphia the next morning. Well, the Cubs put out their release on Traxel going back to Chicago. And it was right in front of Harry for a couple of innings, and finally he discovered this, and he looked at it, and he said, "Oh no," he said, "this is just terrible news for Cubs fans everywhere." He said, "Our best pitcher, Steve Traxel, is having problems with his shoulder. Tomorrow he's going to have to go back to Chicago and get a cocaine shot." And so he looked at him and said, "Harry, that's a cortisone shot." "Oh, yeah. That's what I meant." So he said it was just one thing after another. And in Chicago, the booth in Wrigley Field was pretty small. And Arnie Harris is the director. He was the longtime director. He was in the truck, and he'd call for the shots. And so in the middle of the 5th inning, to get an on-camera shot of Harry Carey and Steve Stone, they would have to turn around. The camera was right there in the booth behind them to get the close-up. So they'd have to put their stuff down, grab the microphone, turn around while the commercial was on, and then when the commercial was over, they'd be right there, and Harry Carey at Wrigley Field, and we're going to the bottom of the 5th. Well, in their urgency to turn around and grab the microphones, Harry had grabbed the lamp. Standing there with the lamp, Harry Carey and Arnie Harris said, "Stoney, the director can talk to the guy in there." He said, "Stoney, what the hell's he doing?" He said, "He's got a lamp in his hand." So Stoney got to turn around, grab the mic, take the lamp away from him. And Stone said he never missed a beat. Not that he didn't notice, he just didn't bother him. So, and I could go carry the Steve Stone story. But, I think if you folks would like to get into a little question and answer daily, it'd be kind of fun. So if anybody wants to vent, or if you're unhappy, if you didn't like Brad's opening speech, well, you can give him some stuff. Who has a question? Let's start it right here and work our way around. Yes, sir.
Can you discuss your proposed postseason plan in September on?
Yeah, every team.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? I mean, we keep adding to it. Everybody here remembers when the two best teams in baseball played the World Series. National League winner, American League winner, we played the World Series. It was pretty orderly, made a lot of sense. And now the best teams in baseball, over 162 games, are probably not going to be in the World Series. Dodgers are a very good team. So are the Atlanta Braves. And neither one of them in the World Series. Two wild card teams were in the World Series. So I say, let's make it like the NCAA basketball tournament, let everybody in. And even in August and September, teams that aren't very good and are going to finish low in the standings still have a chance to do some good in the playoffs. So that's kind of where I was going. I don't think it'll work, but they do keep adding teams and kind of diluting the product in a way. And I don't think the World Series, I don't know, I heard or learned or read that the World Series this year was the lowest rated in a long time, or maybe ever, I don't know. So, yeah, it's kind of taking the luster off anyway.
I was just curious, on the away teams, when you have to go, which of the facilities did you prefer that were nice or were accommodating to you guys? Like facility-wise, are they all basically the same, your studios, or is there away teams that are really fancy, nice? I don't know.
It depends on the age of the stadium. Most of them, most of them are pretty nice, and it's everything you need.
Yeah.
And the key is to be as close to the field as you can get. And some of the booths now, Pittsburgh is an example. They put their broadcast booths at the top of the upper deck. I mean, you might as well broadcast the game from the hotel. The TV, just look at the TV and I mean, the further away you are from the game, there's more stuff in between. Your concentration might not be as good. So,
yeah. But the pitch count's quicker too. You can't fill in as much. You've got to be ready.
Yeah. No, it's the closer you are to the field, the more you're in the game, you feel the game better. Yeah. And the higher up you go, you're remote. I mean, you don't have it. It's different. It's hard to explain, but if you've never gone through it, well, you understand. I'm sure when you're at the ballpark, if you're in the top of the upper deck of Kauffman Stadium, and if you're down behind the dugouts, you're looking at two different games, right? Yeah. No doubt, yeah. Well, the closer you are, the better. Yes?
Danny, you have any stories about Bo Jackson? He's probably one of the best all-around athletes.
Yeah, I would think so, but the thing that hurt him in baseball was that he didn't have a minor league career. I mean, 2 or 3 years in the minor leagues, and you get to the big leagues, and you're still learning. And he didn't have that advantage. He was there pretty quick. And it showed, his inexperience, especially on defense, it showed. And Frank White tells a funny story. Bo was playing right field, Frank, of course, second base. And we were playing Texas, and there were 2 or 3 guys on base. And somebody hit a high, this is with the artificial turf, and the ball comes down, it takes a big high hop on white grass. The Rangers and the Royals, and the Rangers said, as I said, 2 or 3 guys on base. Guy hits a high pop foul into right field. O. Jackson comes racing in, Frank White goes racing out. And of course, Frank can literally hear him coming. A big guy who can really run. And you know he's getting close. So they both pull up and stop. The ball hits out and goes high in the air. And it comes down, and Bo Jackson catches it on the bounce. Now the guys are running around the bases as fast as they can go. And Frank said that Bo got ready to throw to second. Nope, there's nothing going on there. And then he was going to throw to third, and no, that didn't seem to be the right play. And Frank said, finally, Bo looked at him, put the baseball in Frank's glove and said, here, you've been playing longer than I have. Yeah, Bo Jackson was an unusual athlete, and I liked him a lot. We used to kid each other about playing football in college. I said, well, you were a totally different player. I said, you were a running back. I was a wide receiver. I got out there away from the fray, and you were right in the middle of it. But great sense of humor, very, very smart. His wife she had her doctorate from Auburn University, and she's really a nice lady, and I enjoyed both of them quite a bit. And I like Bo Jackson very much. He lives in Chicago, near Chicago now. Plays golf a lot. And he was at Royal Spring Training 4 or 5 years ago. And it's fun seeing him again. Yes?
Which royal said, that's what speed do? And it was a famous quote.
Yeah.
Dyson.
John
Dyson.
What did she say?
What?
That was just,
Dyson.
I thought it was Lorenzo King, but I certainly don't know.
I told him, I said, that's grammatically incorrect. You can do better than that. It's amazing what speed does in baseball. Whitey Herzog, back to Whitey, he went to St. Louis. He had speed here because big ballpark here, and speed was such an advantage for the Royals. The Royals would run teams right out of Kauffman Stadium, literally. The big, slow, plodding teams like Boston and Detroit had no chance. Well, then Whitey went to St. Louis, same thing. And he had even faster teams in St. Louis, Vince Coleman and Ozzie Smith and those guys, Tommy Hurt. They would run National League teams right out of the ballpark. But, yeah, Whitey was so good. He used to go to Grant's Farm. Grant's Farm was where Gussie Bush, who was the Anheuser-Busch CEO, and Whitey and Gussie would meet. Whitey would drive out once or twice a week, and they'd sit and they'd play cards and talk baseball. And Whitey said, one morning they were out there, and the Cardinals are playing great. They're drawing close to $3 million. Everything is going great, and Gussie Bush, of course, is loving it. So they played cards, and Whitey'd say, I bet I need another lefty. Whitey Herzog could never have enough left-handed pitchers out of the bullpen. If he had 13, he'd want 15. He'd say, well, we need another lefty. Gussie'd say, whatever you need, Whitey, you just do whatever you want. You're in charge, and we're playing great. So they're playing cards one morning, and Gussie, who was probably in his early 90s, said, Whitey, everything's going really good. And Whitey said, yeah, we're pretty happy with it. And Gussie said, Whitey, I want to give you a lifetime contract. And Whitey said, whose lifetime, mine or yours? Logical question, right? Hopefully, Whitey's, not Gussie's. Yes, sir.
Do you have any comment on the Royals trying to build a new stadium?
Oh, you had to get me started. All right, you asked the question, I'm going to ask you three. Okay? This is back and forth. I'm going to ask you three questions. New ballpark. Number one, where are you going to park? Number two, where are you going to tailgate? Top of a 10-story building?
Yep.
And number three, and maybe most importantly, what's wrong with Kauffman Stadium? Anything else you want to know?
What do you really think?
How do you feel about pine tar?
Oh, I love it. I use it in my backyard. Yeah, for your tools, you know. That was something, wasn't it? And, you know, the funny thing about that whole incident was that there was no rule against pine tar in the path. There was no rule against it. But they sure made a big deal out of it that one Sunday afternoon. Yes, sir.
Do you have any Kansas City Chiefs stories? Kansas City Chiefs?
ears are going, I'm sorry. I couldn't understand what
He asked
Oh,
if you
okay,
had
that's what
any
you played.
Kansas City Chiefs stories.
You know what? When I was in college, after my sophomore year, first year of football, the dean of students at Overland was very good friends with one of Vince Lombardi's coaches. And they knew that I had not played in high school. I had played 1 year in college, and as Brad mentioned, I had a great quarterback. And we did really well nationally. And he knew that I grew up a Green Bay Packers fan. And it was arranged, this was in the summer, the exhibition part of the schedule, that I go up with a friend of mine to Green Bay and work out with the Packers. What I wanted to do was just go up and watch them practice for 2 or 3 days and drive back to Illinois. But when the two got together, the dean of students and Vince Lombardi's assistant coach, he said, well, tell him to bring, his football shoes and a jersey and sweatpants, and he can work out, which was one of the great experiences of my life. Those were Lombardi's great teams, Bart Starr and Wade Dowler and Jim Taylor and Paul Horning and on and on. And I got to meet all those people. And not only that, I would work out with them for about 20 minutes, and they would show me different techniques, different moves. And so, no, I don't have any Chief stories, but I got a ton of Packer stories. No, I've always followed the Packers. I did used to work out with Len Dawson. Len Dawson would come when he still had his TV show, and he would come to the ballpark, and we'd sit in the dugout and just talk. One night he said, I know you played in college, I knew you were a wide receiver, I knew you did well. He said, I'm going to Liberty, that's where the Chiefs had their training camp at the time. He said, I'm going to Liberty in about a month, and I've got to get ready. He said, what would you think about coming out on mid-morning when the Royals are in town, and maybe for a half hour, 45 minutes, you run pass patterns for me, and I'll get loose. I'm getting ready for training camp for the season. I thought, yeah, that sounds like fun. And we did. And we did that for about 3 years, every August, which was really fun. Yeah, and I met Willie Lanier, who was one of the nicest people. Len Dawson, and I said this, he threw a real nice light ball. It was almost like catching a feather. One day, Michael Livingston, remember him? He was the backup quarterback who came out. And trying to catch his pass, like trying to catch a chunk of lead. Yeah, real heavy, boy, and he really fight it in. Len, you just pick it off. And one day there was the Chiefs had signed he was a track guy, his name was Jimmy Hines. And he was a sprinter, an Olympic sprinter. And the Chiefs thought that maybe he'd be another Bob Hayes. He could be a guy who could just fly down the field. Well, he came out one morning to work out, and Len would tell him to run a pattern, he'd run a pattern, he'd drop, he just couldn't catch it. And I'm running patterns, and I did have really, here I'm going to brag on myself, I had really good hands. I didn't drop anything. If it was there, I was going to catch it. So after the workout was over, we're walking back toward the parking lot. Jimmy Hines came over next to me, and he said, you come into camp? I said, no, I've got a job. He didn't know me from squat. And then Len kind of laughed. He was right there with us. He kind of laughed, and when Jimmy went to his car, Len said, man, if he had your hands or you had his legs, we'd really have something. Neither one of those was going to work. I don't want to run out of time here. How about one or two more? Turn it back to Brad, he's got more announcements. Yes?
I was just wondering what you know about the history of baseball here in Kansas City. Like, did it start after the war, the clubs? What really started? I know you started in 1969, but before that, 20 years before.
Well, of course, the A's who moved to Oakland. After 1 year, 68, there was no baseball here. 67 was the last year of the A's. They went to Oakland. Thanks to Charles O. Finley. He wanted to move the A's from Kansas City to Peculiar, Missouri. That's how dingy he is. But first, the Negro Leagues, the Monarchs, a big deal. And this is all hearing and reading thing for me, because I was never in Kansas City until I got the road job. But the Monarchs were here, and then the Yankees had a minor league affiliate here too. And some of their big stars played here. AAA, Mantle was here, Jerry Coleman, who I talked about earlier. And, yeah, it's quite a history. And when Kansas City got the A's from Philadelphia, the ballpark was just single deck, and they put an upper deck on Municipal Stadium in about 5 months. It was a rush job so that the Philadelphia A's could move to Kansas City in the 54, 55, somewhere in there. So there's quite a rich history of baseball in K-City. Yes, sir. This is your president talking about it.
Other than Whitey Herzog, who is your most colorful player that you have covered?
Kurt Bavacqua.
I was just.
Dirty Kurt. He and I were pretty good friends. When I started with the Royals, there were several players on the team that were older than me, and there were some younger and some same age. So I ran around with players for my first 15 years, which was great fun, very educational. And then a funny thing happened. I got older, the players didn't. Kurt Bavacqua was pretty colorful. In fact, we went and had lunches in Minnesota. And we were walking back to the hotel about a 2-block walk. And a convertible came by, and there were 2 really nice-looking girls in the car. And Kurt was very outgoing, and he waved at them, and they waved back. And they were going slow. It was downtown Minneapolis traffic. And he thought, this is my chance. And he took off running toward their car and dove into the back seat. And away they went. I don't know how that's going to turn out. So we went to the ballpark that night in Minnesota, and he comes over and he says, we each got a date after the game. Yeah, all right. Yeah, he was fun. We've had a lot of guys who you would say were pretty colorful. And we really haven't, this is one really nice thing. We have not had hardly any, what you would call bad apples. And if they were, you and Kaufman were gone. They weren't there very long.
Could you talk a little bit about just how good George Brett was and your time announcing for him?
Yeah, he was, and I've said this so many times, the toughest mentally player I've ever been around. Some guys, Major League Baseball players, when the game's on the line, really aren't too sure whether they want to be at home plate, maybe driving the run to win the game. There's a few that, I let him do it, and George loved it. That was his time to shine. And he was so mentally tough, he embraced that moment. He wanted to be the guy in the batter's box. And he wasn't a natural hitter. He and Charlie Lau, the hitting coach, had to work and work and work. They broke his swing completely down. He was barely in the big leagues long, and he was hitting about 180. And we came back from a road trip, and Charlie told George, we had a day off, and Charlie told George to be at the ballpark. He said, I'll meet you out there at 2 o'clock. And that's when he broke his swing down, and now you remember, you can visualize him. But he was holding the bat way up here when he was a young guy. And Charlie asked him, he said, why? He said, George, let me ask you a question. What's the deal here? Why are you holding the bat way up here? And George said, because Yaz, Carly Yastrzemski, because Yaz does. Charlie said, okay, that's fine. Now, think about this. When Yaz hits, where does he go? What happens when the ball's coming to the plate? His hands drop down to here, into the hitting position, right? You got to be here. You can't be here and hit. You can't be down here and hit. And so Charlie said to George, he said, well, if we have to get here, why don't we start here? Right? Makes sense. And that was the beginning. That was the start. And Charlie Lau made George a Hall of Fame hitter, player, yeah. And he had to work hard on his defense too, because he was rough when they first came to the big leagues, to be nice about it. It sure worked out for him. So,
Was Kurt Bavacqua the third baseman before George? Is that? Who
Uh,
took, what, was
they
he
were-
third baseman?
they were contemporary, I think, yeah, they were,
Okay.
yeah. Kurt was an infielder, but a kind of a utility player.
Okay,
You know, wherever they needed him to play, he would play. Yeah,
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Like those games, yeah.
well, thanks for inviting me. It's been fun.
Thank you.
And you can blame Alice Hawk for this.